Welcome, everybody. Thank you for gifting us your lunch break. It's something we'll hold very dearly. And because we're a nice small group, I'm going to propose that instead of having a very formal panel, we have what we call in the Pacific a talanoa, which is like an informal conversation. And I'm proposing it because the panelists are incredible people. And I think that as they speak with you, you'll feel inspired to want to have a conversation with them. So I'm going to try and keep my questions short so that you can engage and interact. My name is Emily Sharp. I'll be your moderator. I've joined us from Fiji, from the Pacific, and we're going to be talking about ocean breakthroughs. But perhaps before we get to the breakthrough, maybe we can just talk about the ocean. The ocean in all its wildness. So in 1957, Edward Bullard made a very incredible statement in a publication, which was along the premise of we know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the ocean floor, even though 2/3 of the Earth's surface is ocean. And that premise still held true through to David Attenborough's Blue Planet series in 2017. And in fact, it still holds true. If anyone has read the DFF's theme publication launched today, which is talking about the fact that even though 30% of our ocean has been mapped, we still understand so little. Mapping doesn't bring necessarily understanding. And even though every year we identify more marine life, perhaps something like 91% of our ocean life still remains unidentified. And to try and close that gap between the known and the unknown, between 2010 and 2023, ocean-related investment doubled. But it's really just a drop in the ocean. And I don't know if anyone in the ocean, in the audience has been following COP. Few nods. For me, I've been following COP because in the Pacific, we can't talk about climate change without talking about the ocean. The ocean climate nexus is incredibly important, and many of our Pacific delegates have been talking about the importance of ocean in terms of climate adaptation, mitigation, and justice. And when we look across the room, perhaps there's familiar faces, but hopefully there's some that you have not met, but know that you're connected. You're connected by the ocean. You're connected because the land and the ocean is connected by the microorganisms, by the nutrients, by the energy that's constantly flowing. You're connected to the panelists, especially through the beautiful imagery behind us that Karim has gifted. So just like the ocean brings stories to and from the shore, we invite you to journey with us with the stories that our incredible panelists will be sharing. We have Dr. Ulrike, who is joining us from incredible work around reef restoration, science to action, with creativity, with boldness, with passion, and really rethinking how we can bring restoration to build resilience. We have Karim, who's joining us, and he has so many gifts to give in his visual storytelling, but also in terms of his investing in the next generation of visual storytellers and bringing the ocean to us. And then finally, on our far left, Dr. Juan, who has spent so many hours exploring under the water, 20 years of expeditions, for example, with Jacques Cousteau. And so the panel have stories to share with images, with underwater stories, and really, I think the most important, with bringing science and what is yet to still be discovered in the frontier, but with a sense of humanity and with a look to the future, learning from the past. So with that introduction, I might first hand to you, Dr. Juan. If you think about all those many of hours that you've spent on the sea, under the sea, what can you really share with us about the potentiality that the ocean can bring to the challenges that we have, to the assets that we can build on for our current and our future generations? Just a small question.
Just one question. Try for what, 3 minutes? Hello everybody. Uh, I think it's not 20 years, 40 years. I'm older. You think, clean the water. I think the potential of the ocean is incredible. The amazing capacity of regeneration. So I'm the positive guy. Excuse me. The regeneration of the ocean is so fast. Unfortunately, we keep just pushing harder, and that regeneration is getting slower. But it's incredible what you can do in the ocean. And you're talking about years. I can pick up time. You mentioned Cousteau years. Almost 40 years ago, we went exploring. We went diving in places nobody dove before. I repeated that experience doing Blue Planet 1 in 2000. And unfortunately, I saw the same places completely destroyed or very damaged. But then being positive, many years, 15, 17 years later, until 2 years ago with Explored Cup, we did a Papua New Guinea, Rangan Part, and see how everything regenerates. Why? Because somebody decided, a government or some young people, crazy people say, we need to protect this. We need to understand it and protect it. So what happened is it came back alive. And that example goes in many parts of the world. In the Caribbean, you have places like Bonaire or Cuba. And I can go for hours talking about examples. So we have the capacity to do that. I think you mentioned about 1953, they thought we know less about the ocean or the space. 20-some, 30 years ago, Dr. Sylvia Earle, somebody I really love to work with her as a friend, as a colleague, she said, Juan, and she's 90, for whoever never mentioned her about her. She said, Juan, when I was a kid, there were less whales in the ocean there today. And not too long ago, I just Googled it. And when I was a kid, there were less whales there today. So as human beings, we have managed to protect and bring it up. We're not there yet. So my answer to that, the potential is huge, but we have to be careful.
Actually, it's really interesting you bring up the example of the whales. I was in Tonga a couple of weeks ago, and Her Excellency, the Princess of Tonga, is preparing legislation now so that the rights of whales are recognized formally. And, from the big whale to the microplankton. Ulrike, I'm going to come to you. Also, maybe thinking about the destructive story also of our oceans and the reefs. And I think something actually that I read about you rather than in story was this notion of environmental trauma. That yes, the ocean is beautiful, can also be quite overwhelmed by the destruction. And yet the work that you're doing in terms of reef restoration and 3D printing terracotta reefs is incredible. Can you share a bit with us about your work, but also really thinking about the legacy that brings in terms of resilience?
Thank you. Something that came to mind just because we talked about whales is, and it's a fact that many people don't know, is that actually some whales also depend on the health of coral reefs to navigating by the sound of the reefs. And as coral reefs in the tropics deteriorate, that sound also diminishes, and some whales can get beached because of that and die. That's just a sad anecdote, I guess. But yeah, when you said, Juan, that a lot of places in the ocean can regenerate really, really fast if we only protect them. And that's so beautiful. And that's something that we also use in our work at reefs. Just that in some areas, when they're really barren and you don't even have any habitat left, imagine a coral reef that used to have this vast topography, extent in the vertical and in the horizontal, all these caves. if that has deteriorated and it does in more and more places, it's really hard for nature to come back. And that's where we asked ourselves, how can we bring those areas back to life that maybe have been barren for 10 years, 20 years, or 40 years, as some reefs in the Galapagos, for example. And then we can really just come in and rebuild that habitat, that topographical complexity of the reef to allow nature to come back faster and really unfold that regenerative potential. And something that I think is beautiful is that a regenerational relationship with nature, with the ocean, is mutual. So if we help nature regenerate, if we help the ocean or the reefs regenerate, they help us regenerate as well. And as the relationships between the ocean and people, humans in the Pacific, exemplify a lot, is really that we're so dependent on the ocean and those healthy reefs for coastal protection. There's a lot of potential medicinal compounds in there that we haven't even discovered. So if we kind of help this ecosystem come back to life and flourish, we can also start reciprocally benefiting from everything that it has to give us.
Beautiful. I mean, both you and Dr. Juan have, I guess, the privilege of being able to spend time in the water and really build that respect and the relationship. But not everybody is able to do that. And Karim, I'm going to come to you because I think that's why your work is so important. You're actually bringing the ocean to us. And you're doing that also in terms of building the next generation of visual storytellers. The beauty, the sadness, the emotions reflect for us why that is so important for us to have that relationship, to incentivize us to act.
Yeah. So many people depend on the ocean for their survival on this planet. And so many people don't have an in-depth look at what goes on underwater, right? Most people, if they're lucky, their relationship with the ocean, they can, sit on the beach, they can maybe go and snorkel and see some of these animals and fish, but there's so much that is hidden down there. And every animal in the ocean is incredibly complex and fascinating. We talk about coral reefs. These are cities with, different personalities where fish build homes and they, manicure their piece of coral the way that somebody takes care of their garden. There's, the creatures that come out at night that roam the reefs and hunt, and, the little fish get scared and go in. And then you have these behemoths, these giants, the whales that are these keystone species, and they communicate across oceans with each other. They sing, they have personalities, and the more time that I spend with these animals, the more I realize that they are in many ways similar to humans. We think of ourselves as separate, and these are animals, but the reality is animals have such complex and beautiful lives. And so my job and my passion is to try and go in and tell their stories, to get a perspective and a look, to share that with other people so that they can appreciate and see, these animals on our planet. And some of them are in far distant places we'll never go, but some of them are also just in our backyards. They're just all around us. And I think storytelling is really the bridge between science and the public to capture the heart. I mean, the work that Juan and Uli are doing is so incredibly important. I mean, restoring coral cities so that they can continue to thrive is, there's little beyond that I can think of as more important in the ocean. But that story needs to be told and shared with people to capture their hearts so that we can think, okay, how can we take the next steps? What is the future to protect these places for future generations? Because nature really, I think, is the greatest encyclopedia and library that exists. And right now, as humanity, we're burning that library to the ground. And once it's gone, when a species is extinct, you can't get it back. So our job as humans, I think, as the stewards of this planet, is to take care of nature and let it thrive, because when nature thrives, we also thrive.
There's such this common thread with you all in terms of the mutual reciprocity of all sentient beings, but also democratizing, I feel, like the care, the stewardship of oceans, bringing the oceans to people, bringing creativity to reefs and conceptualizing them as miniature cities of not just structures, but regenerative beings. I think if there was something I'd love to explore a little bit more, given this is the Museum of the Futures, it would be around what are you really wanting to leave as a legacy for the next generation? And Karim, there's something that I love about your work, and it was something that struck when we were talking, where you were saying, you grew up watching documentaries about the ocean and natural resources, and often they were narrated by David Attenborough. And he's amazing, but he's not necessarily the steward of all those ocean resources. So you're working with young people to build their skills to be able to be the storytellers. I might start with you for that. And then if anyone wants to be thinking of their curious question for our panel, we'll go to you after this next round. Thanks, Karim.
Yeah, thanks. So I co-founded a nonprofit called Kogia. We realized two things. There's all of these organizations, activists, scientists, conservationists that don't have good access to ocean media. They don't have the materials to tell their stories. So we built a library of photos and videos that are free to be used by all of these people around the world that are doing, boots on the ground, doing the work in order to be able to, communicate their message, raise funds, educate, and, change policy. The other thing that we realized was so important was to give the tools to the next generation so that stories can be told not just from a Western perspective about, here's a place over here where there's animals, but that young people can have camera gear and the ability to tell the stories and communicate their own message from their own communities and output that into the world. So we started this fellowship program where we gave camera gear and mentorship and a platform for these young people to tell their stories. And the idea is to globalize nature, storytelling, and conservation, to connect up these different groups of nonprofits, of scientists, of activists with young people, filmmakers, photographers, so that we can really take a global look and tell stories in many ways than just the traditional format of, nature documentaries that we all have been familiar with and love.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to riff off that, Ulrike or Juan?
Yeah, I think that storytelling is a secret, and everything have changed. I mean, for our days, when you used to have 3-4 TV channels in your own countries. Nobody wanted the world. 4 years ago, we have 3 channels. There was no cable or YouTube, so everybody can watch Cousteau, Sir David Attenborough, 2 more, and they're gone. Cousteau's gone. The only one from this group is Sir David, and he's 100 years old. But kids today, young people, they don't have the access. They have so much to watch, and what are they going to watch? And then we load them with a lot of negativity. It's climate change, it's ocean acidification, it's overfishing, and it's just so much. Kids these days, they don't see that. They're looking at a phone, like robots, and they don't spend more than 30 seconds, probably even less than that. So what you're doing through storytelling, allowing those kids to have access to it, kids talking to kids. I remember many years ago, I went to a conference, I think it was in the UN, and the opening statement was by a teenager. And she said to everybody, said, "You guys are doing everything wrong." And I was like, okay. And said, "What about if you give us information and we kids distribute information, because you don't know how to talk to us?" And that just shocked me. And so what are you doing? You're much younger than me. Obviously, it's the way forward.
It's amazing.
No. Beautiful.
I think, because you asked about legacy, and I think it's about hope. I would love to, through the work that we do, and you all do, if we could leave people with hope, I think that would be very powerful, because we see so much tiredness in a way, right, with the state of the world and the state of nature, that can almost bring us, well, into grieving first, but then also maybe into giving up. But there's so much reason to not give up, because the regenerative potential of everything that we may have destroyed for various reasons is huge. We just need to sometimes help it a little bit to get over that edge and kind of get into that positive cycle back up. And the other thing that we'd love to leave the world with reefs is, I'm dreaming of this distributed network of groups that know their local reefs and that can use their own approach, incorporate the approach that we are developing if they want, if it fits their reef, but that are empowered in a way to help their own reefs through knowledge, through connections. In every project site that we work on, we connect with the government, of course, because that's also important. Try to establish marine protected areas, so conservation areas around the regenerative projects, so that you can have both, because you can't regenerate if you don't protect. If you regenerate and then exploit, we also don't get anywhere. So yeah, if let's say in 5 years we could have this distributed network of people that also share information and that all start rebuilding their degenerated reefs from the ground up, I think that would be amazing.
Brilliant.
I would love to see the ocean that results, or the coastal ocean resulting from that.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. And I really think the way the narratives that we use really shape our behavior. And it's sparked for me, across the Pacific and other regions, we're often called smaller island states. And it really sometimes it incentivizes a type of behavior. And recently I was in a meeting and the person from Cook Island said, I don't want to be known as a smaller island state anymore. I want to be known as a big ocean state. We're the boss. And so I love to think about people in the boss regions being this network of networks, changing the narratives with the images through the voice of young children, really inspiring us to be hopeful, but to bring action, science and policy to action. At that point, can I open up to anyone who's feeling inspired? Fantastic. We have a question. Yes, please. Have we got some mics for any?
Maybe just shout it and we'll add a question.
Yeah, well.
Stem something or use is
Students tell stories matter a lot. So
I think that the story that one is choosing to share. Yes.
okay, we'll do it again. So I'm gonna state something obvious. Animals don't create and share stories, humans do. And so the story that I choose to create and share says more about me than about the animals. So I think we sometimes forget that. We get immersed into the story. So following that line of thinking, I'm quite curious when you move that to the collective stories, the different narratives that are being shared, say something about the present and about the future, because that's what's going to drive the future, right? The stories that we share today. So based on this, from what I understand, the collective platform for storytelling that you've created, and also in your fields of work, what stories are you noticing being activated and shared right now that can give us a hint about what's the discursive narratives now in the field, so to speak? I'm just curious if you see something.
See a pattern?
Yeah, fascinating question. You're right about, we tell stories of animals, so we project our idea on top of them. And, there's some animals, like, in the back, you've been seeing some footage of humpback whales. These are almost the ambassadors to the ocean that people love. And so you can start by telling their stories to get people immersed in it. But there's all of these other little creatures that don't get as much attention. And if you protect one large species, that can have a cascading effect on all those other little creatures. Now, I'm not sure the way of how you would really do full justice to the animal to tell their story, because we always project our own emotions on it. But at the same time, animals, they're not just simple beasts. I've met whales that have very different personalities, different moods, different feelings, depending on the time of the day, depending on how just all kinds of other things that I'm not sure what dictates those different emotions. But I think that can also be a way to connect people up to those creatures, to realize that there's more to them. And I think that's just the starting point to get people to, move into a new space where they can start thinking about how they interact with the ocean and the natural world around us.
Yeah, I think if you look at, pick up back to Blue Planet, David Attenborough, I remember when we started production in the late 90s, the idea was to show the beauty. Used to show the beauty of the oceans. That was the only conversation. And the direction from the BBC was, you have to show the beauty. People in the team say, well, it's not only beauty, we have to show something else. And first one was David Attenborough saying, no, we're going to show the oceans as they are. What happened almost 20 years later with Blue Planet 2, it's completely the opposite. Let's show how beautiful the ocean, but how do we destroy the ocean? So the narrative have completely changed. So, and it's a middle, I try to explain myself, a middle between both. One, the natural history, filmmaking, and show the animals how beautiful they are. The other one, what is happening to them. But unfortunately, people are getting tired of listening to bad news, because you look at the news every day, it's bad news. The ocean, the space, the land. So you have that, the middle point that you show the beauty and how to understand that beauty in order to protect it. And that's my message when I try to communicate to storytelling or making films. I mean, I'm working a film right now, it's about sound. Nobody thinks about sound in the ocean, but you say, you listen to a coral reef and you know if it's healthy or not. You can hear the whales from 200 miles away. And all that is interlinked. I mean, I don't want to jump into things, but one of the things we're looking at, the larvae from the polyps from the coral, when they're floating planktonic, they can hear. They have ciliates, like we have in our ears, they have hairs. And that attracts them to some area. So we have to link all that to show people, that's my narrative, that is, okay, we're linked, we're all one. We're humans with hair, with ears, you have corals with little hairs, they have the same. If you have whales, they sing. Oh gosh, I can go for hours. So I don't know if I answer your question, but the narrative is very difficult. And I think the secret now is the young people doing narrative. Because we have seen every time I look at a production, we keep doing the same with better technology. So we film the same whales with better cameras, no helicopters, drones. So now we have to get into how we get those amazing images to young people.
If you wouldn't mind just passing that.
Joachim Isaacson from the British Minister of Defense.
Sorry, can you speak a little louder?
Yes, son.
It's on.
Hello. There we go. Joachim Isaacson from the British Minister of Defense. And I just want to say, I think young people are very engaged with this. I can take my own daughter, she's 16, and she talks about it every morning when I drive to drop at the bus stop and so on. And very engaged and so on, but also an enormous frustration. She's saying, Daddy, if the whales are threatened, why are we not stopping them being killed all the time? Why are so many sharks killed every year? Why does not anyone do anything? Are you doing anything, Daddy? And I think your stories are enormously important, but how do we get them to those people who actually make the decisions? We have 3 of the most distracting fishing fleets in Europe. All access to all the information and so on. They're still giving the same fishing quotes and allow their fleets to destroy the seas everywhere. 3 European countries. And then you have all the others that do the same thing. So how do we get it to the next step to actually make big things happen? Because we don't have much time.
If I may just take a first hit, I think the key to that probably has to lie in the people rather than waiting for the complicated connections of policy and capital and the corporate world to kind of come up with something. There have been really, really nice examples from huge MPA generations, so the generation of very big marine protected areas around, for example, some of the big ocean states, because they own or like they govern a large amount of ocean. And the reason why some of these were able to be established was because the people that lived there and that helped govern this were really for protecting the ocean, because they understood through a process, of course, how important it is to their lives in the future and to the lives of their children. But I think, so to bring that full circle, I don't think we're going to achieve anything in the direction that we all wish without bringing the majority of the people somehow on. And I always tend to think that, you know, the layer of trends is the fastest moving layer, and then kind of politics is maybe in the center as the slowest moving. Maybe if we can change the trend layer, so make protection more and more trendy, which it is kind of, I think we're going down or up that path. I have some hope there for sure.
I used to think that there would be one great solution that would fix it, and started to realize that actually we have to target this at so many different angles. And I think, people giving the tools to the people who are doing the work, the really like that are on the ground. There are so many people doing incredible work that is so important, but nobody hears about the work they do. So trying to tell those stories, capture people's hearts. There's a reason why pandas have come back from the brink of extinction. It's because we love pandas and we've captured the hearts of children and people all over the world. And if we can do that with nature, with the ocean, with fish, to tell the stories that fish aren't just, this massive food that to pull and extract from the ocean, but that they all have personalities and that they communicate with each other and that they even create art and these beautiful structures in the ocean, then that can start to change people's perspective. And if we get educators on board and we can convince politicians and corporations and using our money as a tool, because that's a powerful tool to get companies and industries to do what we want. That is a way to push in the direction. And it's, of course, it's tough. Then there's the action campaign. What comes after you tell the story? What's the next step? How do you get people to become more involved? As well as not putting the blame on the regular person. This narrative has been, it's our fault, regular people's fault. And I think we're starting to realize and wake up and shift that idea of it is not our fault, but it is now our responsibility, because if we don't do it, then who else will?
Yeah, I can go direct to your question too. There's a lot of people, I was saying, they're hiding, but to England, you have a foundation example, Blue Marine Foundation. It's one of the biggest in the world. The ones that are more proactive against fisheries, not against complete fisheries, regulated fisheries. And the actions they're taking in UK, they're amazing. In the last 3-4 years, they have changed laws. So it's a lot of people that we as general public don't know what they're doing. I've been working for many years in a project in Patagonia. So how we do that, we lobby with the government, making films about the Patagonia, what's under the water, taking that to the politicians. We have managed to convince the politicians that they have an issue with the salmon industry, and we're getting there. So, but all these groups working behind the curtains, and they're doing it through filmmaking, we're doing it through lawyers. Some actions taken, not fast enough, but it's happening.
And perhaps I might just add too, before we go to your question. In the Pacific, we have early career Asian professionals. So they're young people who have a dedicated role. They're scientists, but they're storytellers as well. And they bring science-based storytelling to decision-making platforms, to heads to the ministries of fisheries, to ocean symposiums. They use Earth observation imagery, for example, to show the inundation of the Runic Dome, which is in Republic of Marshall Islands, which is capping the radioactive waste from the nuclear legacy. So they're bringing storytelling in ways to the decision makers to help decision makers take the intangible, the hard to understand science to their politics, to their decision making forums. And it's through the power of youth and storytelling. So I think there are some great examples. I'm just going to do a time check also. We've got one question here and one
more.
and one at the back. Thank you.
It was just related to storytelling before, because we were talking about telling the stories of nature, the stories of the animals. And I think that it is very important to tell the stories of the people that are doing the job.
Yeah.
Because that's what will inspire future generations to follow that path, right? Because if you look at nature, you see what's going on, but you don't really know what your capability is to change it, right? So the inspiration of the people doing the job and telling their own stories, why am I doing this? And I think that's what people will follow. And I see a lot of organizations and companies as well putting faces onto the actual work, and that seems to work. And we had Jacques Cousteau, Dr. Sylvia Earle. Those are legends, right? And we need to have so many more that people can follow. So it was just a comment.
Yeah. I think we have some next generation legends at the front for sure. I think there's one last question there. Thanks, Cecil.
Thank you. This conversation is so inspiring and beautiful, like the footage behind you. But since we're at the Dubai Future Forum, I wanted to ask each of you if there was an invention or an advanced technology or something that you wish could be invented that would make your life or your job easier. And I'm in media like Karim, so if there was a camera that shot better in darkness, but is there any invention or technology that could come in the future that would make all these aims even easier or better or more effective? Thank you.
Yes. Fantastic final question.
Definitely anything about monitoring underwater, so measuring what is happening. Still, we've been trying to do that for so long, improving tools, etc. But in every conference about nature, I'm still so jealous or envious of the land-based people, because they can use satellites for everything, and then they just measure chlorophyll and so on and so forth. And I'm like, oh, but it doesn't go into the water deep enough. And likewise with the onset of AI obviously being great in identifying species, for example, bird sound, right? That works pretty well right now. But even just a simple video species detection of fish is still a really, really hard task, because there is not enough historic data. There's just literally not enough video of fish where somebody said, this is fish A and this is fish B. So we don't have enough training data for the AI that could be able to do this to actually do it. It's really the lack of the most basic data. That's one thing. So it's not a fancy technology, very basic. Then I'm putting a lot of hope and effort actually into sound, so soundscapes, because in the future, because we regenerate larger areas of degraded reef, right? And to measure what's happening, increase in fish biomass, increase in new corals settling on that area, for example, we're still going in with local teams of divers to measure everything, because it's still the best method. But if we could just dip a microphone in the future, we would be able to measure much more frequently and just probably get a better idea. But again, the basics for generating these algorithms that would be able to analyze sound in a way to tell me how healthy the reef is from 1 to 10, that's still lacking to the most part. But the field is moving, as I will know. Yeah, so in exciting directions, actually.
Yeah. The camera technology is getting better faster and faster, and that makes life much easier. But the hardest thing about filming and photographing underwater is just getting to where you want to be. You know, if you're freediving, you have to hold your breath and then dive down into the depths to get to a spot where you can see, you know, fish moving around coral and a whale passing overhead. So what I would love to have is to be able to swim like a dolphin. You know, to be able to move faster underwater and hold my breath for longer.
Can I get that as well? When you have it?
Yes. that would really make a huge difference in being able to tell these stories, and also for more people to have access to the ocean. So it's not just restricted to, a few privileged filmmakers or scientists to go around the world to some distant place, but to get more people in the water, in their local ecosystems. And if these reefs are restored, if you keep doing the amazing work that you're doing, that will just be more accessible for people around the world.
We'll try to do dive training as well around these areas so people can actually go and help us and profit from the work as well. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, technology. I've been lucky enough to be collaborating with the Dubai Future Foundation for the last year, and a lot of things are coming for monitoring. But I have two things. I love technology. Allowed us to go to 120, 140 meters with rebreathers, what we call the twilight zone. We don't need a sub. And I love that area. So that technology allowed us to go and visit this area. But also technology have developed the systems to do deep sea mining. That's one of the worst things kind of happening in the next generation. So a balance. Technology is great, but if we have a way to control that technology or understand what is going to happen using that technology, it would be better.
And I would say I think there's some real promising work where indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge systems are working together with Western science. And there's great examples of when you bring those worldviews and the ways of knowing collectively, that you can have a deeper understanding of the value, of the behavior, of the potential. And I would think that if there's ways that we can continue to be able to democratize that kind of information, but hold true to the knowledge holder, so really thinking about data governance and IP, but being able to make sure everybody can appreciate diverse views, diverse, worldviews, and the valuing of the ocean. I think that's going to be really important in any kind of tech or research futures for sure. Yeah. So we're coming to a close to our panel. Thank you so much for the fantastic questions. I think our panelists are final. And I'm going to do one final pop quiz for our panelists. They don't know this, so let's see how they go. If you could gift back to the space, so in the Pacific, we like to close Talanoa by kind of showing the reciprocity. So we'll gift back to you some final thoughts to take for everybody to take with them about the oceans, about the future, about our next generation, about research and development, and about agency. Each of us in this room has agency and narrative to bring to oceans and oceans breakthrough. Can you gift your final words back to the audience, please?
I'll try. Do I have to start? I think I would like to leave you with a thought that it's not hard to help the ocean. As simple as talking to your friends or your neighbor about it, about the simple fact that it is something we do need to care about. And then that will spread, We have networks. Networks are incredible. And they'll help that information spread. So I think that's a really powerful thing to do. Maybe you want to think about that when you're back wherever you have to go back to.
Yeah, we have dedicated our lives to ocean conservation and working in the ocean, but that doesn't mean that other people who haven't taken that pathway, that they can't also contribute to it. I mean, there's so many ways to look towards the future to help with the ocean and nature conservation. I would say the most powerful thing you can do is within your means, whether that is, through corporations, if you're working in the world of finance and business, if you can fund some of the work that people are doing to protect the oceans, if you are in the political sphere and you have political influence, if you're in educational sphere, or really if you're in none of those and you just want to make some life changes or share some information that you come across with those around you, it's really a mindset. Caring for the planet, it might seem daunting, it might seem hopeless, but changing that mindset a little bit on a small scale across millions and billions of people, it does have an impact, and it shifts the tide into the direction that we want to go to protect these places for all of the future generations of people and animals and coral and plants.
You say everything.
Sorry.
A lot of people keep, in interviews you talk, they say, let's save the ocean. And my answer is no, let's save ourselves. Because the ocean be there in a million years. We won't be there. Maybe we dolphins with 6 fins and 4 eyes, but the ocean be there. We won't be there. So my message is to everybody, learn about the ocean, understand it. Automatically you will love it. And indirectly you're going to start spreading the word about how to learn and love it. So just be curious there, and just share it with everybody you can.